Thanks, first of all, for coming out tonight, everybody. Spending some time with us. We are live streaming for the Georgia Game Developers Association tonight. So if you guys have any questions, follow-ups to things we discussed in the slides, or just general questions on internet security or other security, and you don't feel comfortable like raising your hand and speaking during a live stream, we do have some Post-it cards back on the table there. Feel free to grab some of those, and you can just write your question, and then after the event's over, you can meet up with us and discuss those. Also, some of the stuff is going to be a review for some of you guys, because the target of this is kind of general audience and getting to know internet security, and some of this is going to be new for. So as you go through, just kind of think of some things that you're learning while watching this. Let's get started. Leveling up your security. And this is about protecting what matters to you. So for each person, this is going to be something different that you focus on. For some of us in the digital space, it's about protecting things like emails, texts, browsing history, location. For other people, it might be about protecting other things. So just starting out, why security? Does anybody have any things they can think of that they want to secure? Hands, yell it out.
Social security number.
That's the first.
I wonder why. Good timing. Anyone else? Brian?
All my data.
Yes. Anyone else?
Banking information.
Banking information. Valuables in people's homes, their pets, all sorts of things fall into this. So a few I put up, protecting your family, especially children and elderly. This goes to your social security numbers, your Equifax data, your identity theft and reputation. And this can impact future job prospects as well. If you've had identity theft and there's bad things on your record, failure to pay for things, that can show up in things like interviews and credit reports and all that sort of fun stuff. Preventing scams, and just being a good citizen, avoiding implication in a crime. So here, as far as being a good citizen goes, it's just the fact that if you are infected by malware and then your system is then used in like a distributed denial of service attack, then you're not necessarily going to get in legal trouble for that, but you can have just your it can be a situation where I forgot what I was going to say. Sorry, I'll just move on. And then to avoid targeted ads. So we will move on. Goals.
Did the animation go?
Yes.
Wow. All right. So, what are we going to do here tonight? What are we going to talk about? The idea is that there are limitations to security training. We want you to understand that you're not going to walk out of here being ready to go with security training. This is a vast topic. We do hope that you understand what the limitations are, you understand what you can do, what you can control, what's reasonable. I mean, you obviously can't control something like Equifax, but there are things that you can do and should be doing. Part of that is teaching you how to do a basic risk assessment, of your assets and what you're interested in securing. I mean, the risk assessment you would do for your Wi-Fi is completely different than the risk assessment you're going to do when you're traveling. And hopefully after this, you can start thinking more about risk assessment day to day. I mean, and most people already do. You already lock your car when you go out. It's likely. I mean, there are things we do. But just hopefully to expose that a little bit more. Ideally, to get if you learn something, to share it with your friends. If you need a selfish reason to share with your friends, is if they get compromised, you might get phishing emails from them, which would in turn, you might click on it and compromise yourself. So there's a selfish reason for that. But, help them out too. We all have friends and family who are completely clueless about this stuff. And finally, stay current on security. That means that, it's like drinking from a fire hose. It does not mean you have to go out and read every Turk journal that's out there. You don't have to go out and read about Blueborn and Sonic Cry and all the other stuff that's coming up this weekend. It's come up over the last week or two. But you should be familiar with certainly the Equifax stuff that's hot in the news. there are sites like Threads which kind of boil it down for you and don't give you all the information at once. To stay current on security also means keep your devices current, not just you, keep your phone and your software current as well. So.
And also with sharing things with your friends and staying current. So we've printed out little one sheets with basically the tips that we're covering here in the presentation. They're over on the table there. Feel free to grab a handful of those, bring them home, share them with your friends, share them with your neighbors, share them with your family members. And it provides not only the stuff we're covering today, so you don't have to take furious notes, but it also includes a couple other resources like some online links for some other things that you can use to keep up to date. So that way you don't have to feel like you're sitting here taking notes. So as far as limitation goes, I really like this quote I found online. There's no such thing as permanent and perfect security. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is that even diligent companies that play by the rules, that invest in security, get compromised, and their software gets compromised. There's a lot of reasons for this. One of them is that technology itself changes very rapidly. You're always trying to add features, you're trying to make changes to make the users more happy, and because there's so much feature churn in a limited amount of time, you inevitably have some bugs that slip through. This is why our focus tonight is not going to be on tools. I'm not going to say, you should install this thing, you should use this product, because all of that stuff ages really poorly, where I may tell you tonight, and then tomorrow there's a big security vulnerability in that software itself. So I'm really, tonight, the focus is on the methods you can use for protecting yourself online. And then that way, this is stuff that you can kind of make your own decisions on what software to use, what you want to go towards, what you want to avoid. And it ages a lot better. Next, just hackers are discovering new vulnerabilities and techniques. Researchers in the field are discovering new vulnerabilities and techniques. So there's a lot of people who this is either their day job to do or something they do for fun. So there's a lot of people trying to attack and break systems. This is another reason why, even with perfect security, it's not perfect and permanent security. And just as a caveat, this course is really for kind of general day-to-day guidelines that you can follow for making yourself more secure online. It's not intended to be for at-risk populations. So like if you're if you're a reporter that's in the field, like working with sensitive information, this would not be the course you would take. This is more of an introductory course. And also, this isn't going to provide you protection if you're being actively targeted by a government with a lot of funding, black hat group, pen testers, or somebody's actively trying to attack you. There's things that they can do to work around these general guidelines. So with that, let's talk about another limitation, which is just your mindset.
All right, so I'm sure everyone is familiar with Edward Snowden. I like this quote, arguing that you don't care about the right to privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say. There is another quote I like where it says, privacy has little to do with hiding your naughty bits. Rather, it's about empowering strangers with info who probably do not have your best interest at heart. Those two quotes, I think, pretty much sum it up. It is a big topic. There are lots of areas that we covered, but it's manageable. You can do it. There are things that you can control and you should control, and hopefully we'll cover those tonight. Go ahead. The right to privacy is the right to self. You own you, and you get to choose how much you share. Right? I mean, there are countless examples. I mean, we lock our doors. I mean, I'm sure as soon as they invented the window, the curtains were the next thing invented. Within a week. We don't walk around with our social security number tattooed on our forehead. So you have to decide what is appropriate for you to share, what is not appropriate for you to share.
So next we're going to talk about risk assessment. So this is the part where you focus in your security on the things that matter to you, because part of not getting overwhelmed with all the things you could have to protect, your dog, your kids, your data, your social security number, all that stuff, is kind of making a prioritized list of what's important to you. So as you can see, money is important to that kitty. So the first thing you need to ask yourself are, what assets do I care about? So a lot of times in the computer field, you know, we're dealing with digital assets. So we're dealing with things like emails, contacts. What else can you guys think of? Digital stuff we want to protect.
Proprietary software.
Proprietary software, yeah, trade secrets, other stuff.
Purchase history.
Purchase history, customer data. So what you want to do here is you want to start by writing down a list of the data you keep, where you keep it, who has access to it, and what stops other people from getting that data. And next, you need to start thinking about who are the people you need to protect that data from. That's known as your adversaries. And adversaries pose what we call threats. So another name you'll sometimes see for risk assessment is threat model. Because what you're trying to do is make a mental model of the threats against your assets. The next thing you need to ask yourself is, how likely are you going to need to protect that stuff? So, you know, is this something where somebody might actively be targeting you for some reason, or your data might just get swept up in something like the Equifax data breach and your data is there? You know, also with risk, likelihood is a big component of it. So if you think about it, like if we're thinking of hurricanes with the recent situation with Irma, the severity may be really big. It may be a Category 5 storm, but if you're in the middle of Arizona where you're not anywhere near it, the likelihood is very small. So do you need to set up a hurricane shelter if you're there? Probably not. If you're on the coast of Florida, probably, because then you have both the severity and the likelihood. So you're up here in the high-risk zone as opposed to here. And also, how bad are the consequences if they get it? What's the severity? And last but not least, step 5 is, what lengths will you go to prevent them from getting it? So this is the trade-off portion of it. So now you've kind of made a list of the things you care about, who might want those, how they might get them, and how bad it is if they do get them. And now you have to ask yourself, well, how much am I willing to invest in keeping this from happening? Am I willing to invest a certain amount of time, a certain amount of money, a certain amount of inconvenience? So if you're using something like a VPN service to tunnel your traffic, that may slow down your internet connection a little bit. Is that a trade-off you're willing to make? So let's go through like a quick risk assessment example here, which is a real simple one. This is just using your home. So what would be assets in the case of just talking about your home? I guess it's written right there. Feel free to come up with other stuff.
My personal documents.
Personal documents, pets. You don't want people stealing your dogs, your kitties. Who might the adversaries be that would attack your home? Well, easy one, I guess, off the top of your head. Criminal break-in. What kind of skill set would be required for that? They need to be able to pick locks, break your window. Or, I mean, if you're approaching this on a real ground floor, if you just leave your doors unlocked, could they just walk right in? What's the likelihood of this happening? Obviously, depending on where you are, you know, the likelihood is going to vary. Severity, you know, take in mind like the value of your possessions. There's also the peace of mind portion of that. If your house has been broken into, will you be able to go to sleep at night? And then the trade-offs. So this is where you ask yourself, so if I don't have a whole lot of valuables, and this is not incredibly likely, I live in a pretty good area of town, maybe I just need to lock my door. You know, if I live in an area where this is more likely, or the severity is higher, I have more valuables, or it have more impact on my peace of mind, then maybe I should invest in stronger door locks. So this then becomes that trade-off of money, time, convenience. So as you can see, like door locks, better locks, maybe even investing in a security system, iron security system.
Right, so strategies, contain and harden. We threw this up there because hopefully everyone recognizes who that was. All right, contain. Isolate, you know, what you want to keep in and who you want to keep out. What you're going to do with your Wi-Fi network is going to be quite different than I don't know, when you're traveling, for example. We all have Wi-Fi networks. We probably all have guest accounts. Part of this, and one of these slides is going to talk about minimizing your footprint and your attack vectors. They probably all have guest accounts. Is the guest wireless always running? Does it really need to be always running? Do people have your guest password? How widely known is it to the guest? You want to, so how many accounts are on there? You want to think about how you want to protect like your financial accounts, your bank accounts, your retirement accounts, your credit card accounts, anything that you have out there. That includes also your Facebook account and all those things as well. Harden only what you need for as long as necessary. We all have our cell phones. Do you need to walk around with Bluetooth on all the time? There's a brand new exploit that goes after Bluetooth now, and it's pretty bad. You probably don't need Bluetooth on all the time. What about the wireless? Is the wireless on all the time? Do you have applications on there that you might not necessarily need? If you're traveling, for example, you're probably not logging, if you're in Europe, you're probably not logging into your Fidelity or your Vanguard account to manipulate your financial information. You might want to go as far as uninstall those applications while you're traveling to reduce the vector and the opportunity, because someone could steal your phone, and then what do they have? They have probably your name, they have where you do your financials at. There might be enough in there for them to do some social engineering with the institutions. And even beyond that, do you need to bring your phone with you? So these are the questions you should be asking as far as minimizing the attack vectors. If you're not traveling, you've got your browser plugins, and it's not just you, it's your kids, right? If your kids might accidentally install something not know not to, and if you and the child shares an account on that computer that you use to do banking, you might have installed inadvertently a keylogger that you're not aware of. So perhaps you do a separate account for the child. That's off of your main admin account, the one that you use. Well, maybe that's not even enough. Maybe you can. Maybe the child has a separate computer, like a burner computer, so that he's completely off yours and you don't have to worry about it at all. So, start thinking about in ways of how to minimize that attack surface. Where can people get in? And with the internet, it's everything. It's applications, it's things in your phone. They can install something. They can pick up something through Bluetooth that can actually get home in your own private network. Now that you're on your own network, it can do things. It's very similar to what they did with Stuxnet a while back when they were in government. So start thinking in terms of what is reasonably minimal for me to use. And I'm not saying you have to go back to 2 strings of a cup, but you might want to give some thought because there's so many vectors in. Keeping yourself current, keep your software current. Set your automatic updates for your operating system. Not only on your computers and your phones. Don't forget about your Wi-Fi routers as well. Don't forget about your TVs as well. There was a exploit with LG where they were scanning your network and sending all of your data unencrypted back to the mothership. All the files that they found, not the contents, but the names and whatnot. I don't know what they were looking for, but that was happening. So anything that's got internet access is a vector in. So don't restrict yourself to the phone or the computer.
Cool. So now we're going to talk about tools. So these are the way that you achieve these strategies. And I'm sure there's a book on cybersecurity that looks exactly like that. First off, we have encryption. So encryption's purpose is to make data unreadable. And there's 2 times you want to make data unreadable. There's at rest. So this is when you have data that's stored on a drive. If you are using a cloud service such as iCloud or Dropbox, then you will want to encrypt stuff before you can copy it there. And also don't keep it there any longer than you necessarily need to. Another thing here is full disk encryption. So this is just something you do once and it's done. You've encrypted your drive, and now if you have an unfortunate event like you leave that computer in a cab or something while you're traveling, it'll be a lot more difficult for people to get at the data on the drive because now it's unreadable. Secondly, in transit. So this is where you start looking at encryption being used as you're doing things like working on the internet or even sending email using PGP. So this is where you want to look for things like when you're using a web browser and you browse for a site, you want to look for HTTP with an S at the end. Some browsers will also show that as a log icon. That means that it's using an encrypted connection between you and the destination you're going to, so that anybody in between that chain can just intercept the traffic. Also using a VPN. This is basically a tunnel where you're tunneling your data through a service that encrypts it so that it's not unencrypted on the wire. Second tool, passwords. You guys are probably pretty familiar with that, and we actually have a slide with a little bit more information on passwords. And last but not least, multi-factor authentication. So this is just adding a backup to something that's easy to get, like password, which is something that you set. So this also adds not only something you know that somebody else could theoretically find out, but it combines it with something you own, such as your cell phone. So now you have two things that somebody has to get in, has to be able to obtain in order to break into your sites. So most sites these days support multi-factor authentication. Facebook does, Google does, a lot of banks do. So it's something that, you know, when you get home, it would be a good idea to go through your security settings and check if they have multi-factor authentication and enable that. We're talking about passwords.
Does anybody recognize this? Yeah. It's the name of a machine. It was used, I think they came into being after World War I, right about that time. And it's basically for, you know, encrypting communications between governments and businesses. And it has an interesting history in that it was fairly good cryptographically, but the weaknesses that the Allies were able to exploit had less to do with the technology, more to do with the users who were using it, the operators who had sloppy habits, and so they were able to leverage that. I think at one point they got a hold of a manual, right, and you know, then the operators wouldn't change keys, and it was, you know, it was really helpful for us to have, you know, be able to, their sloppiness was helpful, and that's part of what this whole talk is about. Is we have all these technologies, and it's not just putting the right thing in place; it's using it correctly. That's like a big theme throughout this. And with that, you know, we'll go right into passwords. Yeah. There, you know, you have to have a password for everything, and it gets really cumbersome to try and keep them somewhere. So what do? You write them down, you put them in a file somewhere. You know, it seems like the more sophisticated we get with our passwords, the more we require them, the more we encourage people to keep a list of them somewhere, and that's not good. One way around that is to use password manager, right? So KeePassX, I think is what EFF recommends, and it's really high rated if you go read reviews on it. So LastPass is also, I think, pretty well respected. And, you know, the one issue with that is, you know, your password's now in one location, which is subject to a breach. But you know, it goes back to trade-offs and having to do the balance of that Dave was kind of talking about earlier, convenience versus you know, something sophisticated like this. We have. I went to 2001, a guy wrote a paper on how to do correct passwords, and he, within the last month or two, recanted and decided passwords are terrible. We should use passphrases instead, and he's right. A lot of people were doing tricks where they replace letters with numbers and thinking that that's secure, and it's not anymore. So you should be looking to do passphrases, like a horse likes carrots or something like that. And if you want to swap numbers for letters and that, you probably can, but get away from passwords and think more about passphrases. If you have a passphrase, you might not need to write it down versus some complex sequence of characters that you have to have. You want to use different passphrases on different accounts. Your retirement account should not be the same passphrase as your HBO Now account, for example, because, you know, there's enough information. You know, if HBO gets hacked, it will probably go guess which one of the financial institutions you're at, because there's not that many. You don't want to use something that is a phrase that's common. To be or not to be would be a terrible passphrase. Recent surveys have showed that, I think, on passwords, the word password is actually the number one used password alongside with the God. You know, in fact, so think about good, strong passphrases. Start not thinking about passwords. When you can, multi-factor authentication is great. If someone does guess your passphrase, at least you have the option of, when they try to get access to your information, deny it on the phone or whatever other assets you're using to do this with. Enable that whenever. Again, don't write. If you have to write them down, then you have too many. Think about alternate strategies to do this. That's all I have for passwords.
Yeah, one thing I just want to kind of reiterate on that one is the try to avoid at all costs reusing passwords, like Mark said. And the reason is because you think, like a lot of sites these days just use your email address as your login. So then you use the same password across sites, and then say your Facebook site gets hacked for one reason or another, then they just try that email address and that password just down the board on site after site after site after site. So that's the way that people dovetail in from one site like Facebook into banking accounts and other sites. So this is where there is a little bit of risk in using a password manager. It is putting all your passwords in one place. But the good ones like KeePassX do use encryption, so they are encrypting your passwords so that people can't just read them off disk. And it is keeping you honest where you're using new unique passwords that it remembers instead of you having to remember. So you're not having to remember a list of hundreds of passwords for your bank and Facebook, and Google, all that sort of fun stuff.
One more thing too, while I'm thinking about it. I don't know if this is possible because I haven't tried it yet, but if you had previously locked your credit, either freeze or a lock at one of these Equifax, for example, you might want to consider going in and changing it if it's possible, because if they got the database with the information they have, even though we're not being told they have that information, you have to assume they do. So if you had previously locked or froze your credit and there's a password online over there, go and change it if the site supports it. Because if you read Krebs on security, which is a great site, it seems people are reporting now that they'll go back in twice or 3 times and they'll get inconsistent results saying you are not affected. You are affected. You are not affected. So
go back and go to Equifax.
They go to Equifax. Equifax has what is it, Equifax 2017, where you can go to see if you're affected. People have gone back multiple times and got different results. At least that's what Krebs is reporting. So. And how many hacks in the past have they come back and said, oh, 1 million users are affected, oh, 2 million users? I mean, don't trust everything you're being told. Be proactive about that stuff, because that's everything. And like Dave said earlier, they even look at your credit when you apply for jobs now. So you want to be on top of that.
So now we're going to talk about app hardening. So this is just applying the concepts of the hardening technique to applications. So this is apps on your phone. This is also, apps on a computer. So when you're installing new apps, you should really ask yourself just a couple questions. One, is this reputable? So think about the authenticity of the site you downloaded it from. If you're downloading something from the Apple Store or Google Play Store, you at least know that it's getting some level of review. They're trying to look at the apps, and you know what the source is. Second of all, what's the business model of this application? And one thing to keep in mind is that free apps are often free because they're selling your data. So that's something you want to keep in mind. Like when you're signing up for a free service you're not paying anything for, there's probably a reason why you're not paying for it. It's because they're using your data either to try to sell you other services or they're giving it to ad agencies. So just keep that in mind. Thirdly, what is their commitment and how specialized are they? So what you want to think here is, if I'm buying a new Wi-Fi router or I'm buying a new computer, am I buying this from a site that kind of specializes in that thing, or am I buying it from a company that makes hundreds of different products across the line? They make lunch boxes, they make bologna, they make bananas. So you really want to try to get something from somebody who really that's what they specialize in, because then that's something they're committed to. And one easy way to look at this is like if you're looking to buy something, look at how many products that they have even in that same line. Like if you're looking at a Wi-Fi router, do they have 1 or 2? In which case they're going to focus on those 1 or 2. Hopefully they're try to keep them up to date. If they've got hundreds and hundreds of Wi-Fi routers, then they probably can't maintain all of those. So it's a crapshoot whether you get one that they keep maintaining. And fourth is security a priority for them. You can kind of look at this, a lot of them on their websites, they'll tell you, when they release their new firmware updates and things like that. So if they update frequently, that's a good thing. If you see that they basically release it with one version of the software installed and that's all you're ever going to get, probably a bad thing. And then this just goes back to keeping your software current. You want to enable your auto updates, and for things that don't auto update these days, a lot of software these days on computers update at least once a month. On your cell phone, it's like every hour, I think. It's incredibly fast. The big companies like the Googles and the Facebooks and stuff try to put out an update about once a month. So, and they'll check about once a month for updates. And then, again, with the whole app hardening thing, you should really limit the sort of stuff you're sharing. So, when you're installing a new app, it often seems like it wants access to everything. Hey, can I access your contacts? Hey, can I access your location? Can I access your location when you're not using my app? And can I access your photos? You have to ask yourself, why does this app need this particular thing? So, if it's a GPS map app and it asks you, can I access your location? You might say, okay, that makes sense. I'm using it for getting somewhere, so it needs to know where I am. If it starts asking you, can I view your contacts? A little bit more iffy. Maybe it's because they want to make life easier for you so that you can find your friends by your contact book. They want to access your photos. Why would a mapping GPS application need access to your photos? So, these are the questions you want to ask yourself, and then determine, do I want to allow this app this level of access to these things?
One second. On that, a lot of this is common sense. There used to be a flashlight app that would want access to your network and your contact list. Why does a flashlight need that? I don't know if you guys are keeping up with like Sonic Cry. They just pulled 1,000 apps off of one of the marketplaces because they got really clever and they hid all this stuff in a messaging app. And so a messaging app you would expect needs access to your contacts. It needs access to all the information. So they're getting a little bit more clever about this. So just be aware that nothing's going to replace common sense from what we're telling you here. Maybe you want to hold off on installing new apps that you don't know, like a messaging app, or ask, do I really need a third-party messaging app from somebody who I don't know who they are?
What about old apps? What if there was an app that was really cool, but for whatever reason they didn't go anywhere with it? But you were like an early adopter. Are old apps a significant point of concern? Because I probably have one or two from the beginning of the iPhone that don't do anything, but I just like them. But they don't update, go any further than where they were 5 years or 6 years.
I think the older apps are probably okay. They would have been ferreted out by now. You can always.
There's not anything in the way that they were written that would have been.
No, like a lot of the Wi-Fi ones, people were using an SDK. They're kind of innocent. They weren't actually intentionally trying to do this. It was the developers who were using a free SDK to write the software, and this was embedded in the SDK. So there was no malicious intent on the developer to try. They just wanted to get something out quickly, and so they unwittingly released this out there. Old apps probably are not a problem. But these are kind of newer techniques.
Also, some of the older apps, you also have to ask, what do they have access to? Are they actually doing a lot of stuff over your data line? Like, are they downloading a lot of content? So that's the thing. Like, if it's an app you go in and take notes and it's not trying to sync it to a cloud service or something, you don't really have a lot of attack vector there because it's not doing anything over your network. So at this point, we've actually covered everything. You've learned the strategies, which are contained in Harden, and we have talked about the tools you can use, the digital tools like encryption, passwords, multi-factor auth. So at this point, it's really just taking the stuff that you already know and putting it together in a couple situations so you can see how this applies. So at this point, you're a pro, you've leveled up your security, and it's not that hard, like we said earlier. There's not that much stuff to learn to get started with this stuff. So at home, you want to start with whatever's on the perimeter and then work your way inward. So this is usually you want to start with your Wi-Fi unit, and then work your way inward to things like your laptops, your TVs, your gaming stations, anything that's then plugged in to that network. And the reason you do this is because your Wi-Fi point is, your gateway to everything. So you want to keep that secure. So as far as Wi-Fi hardening goes, use the strongest encryption level you can. At this point, it's WPA2. So if you're using WPA1, or you have an older Wi-Fi unit that doesn't support WPA2, it might be time to invest in another one. Looks like you have a question.
I was going to say, or you can flash it with like DDRT stuff.
Yep.
If you know how to do that.
Do what?
A lot of the routers allow you to install custom firmware on it, right? And there's a lot of great open source router replacement packages out there that you can install, and it links us, 45, WRT 45, whatever. You can actually install much more flexible software on there to do the routing versus buying a unit. If you know how to flash devices, it's pretty straightforward. So you might want to consider that because you get some really cool capabilities that don't come out of the box.
We'd like to maybe do some follow-up classes on how to do that sort of thing.
Yeah. I have a question. I've written this down before. I don't think a lot of people, I think this is probably one of the weakest points in most people's homes because a lot of services will provide the equipment to you. So I was thinking to myself, what would you do? Because a lot of the other topics you covered, I already know, and I can roll through my mind like options that I can make a decision about. But if someone provides me with equipment, what options do we have?
Put it behind something. Don't a firewall something.
So if AT&T gives me a piece of equipment, what do you do?
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, so the question is, if you're given a piece of hardware by a company, how can you then further secure that? And that's a good question because I'm also with AT&T, and I found that the router they give me doesn't give me the flexibility that I need. So I've done that. Usually I get around that with other devices. So I can put it behind a firewall of some sort. I don't use their wireless that they provide because on the model that I have, if I give you guest access, you can go to the machine itself and you see all the passwords. It's just out there in plain text. It's terrible. So I don't actually use their wireless as a secondary wireless thing. And I kind of just acknowledge that all my signals have to ultimately go through it, but I usually send them through something first, something a little bit more secure first, and turn off their radios and go that route. And just realize, okay, I can't get the security wrong with that device. I'm going to put something in front of it. Buy a more secure Wi-Fi router, for example. Just use the Wi-Fi portion of it.
Yeah, there's not really an easy answer because for a lot of people, you just kind of have to wait until the service themselves applies security updates to that equipment. Because if you try to install your own firmware update, sometimes that'll break their communication with that thing. So you can call, your service representative and say, I understand that there's a problem with this. I'd like to escalate it. I'd like a new modem. Or if you're on a service where, you can actually provide your own hardware, then provide your own hardware. Or like Mark says, you can also put a security device in front of that.
It's really important to keep it up to date because there is a known vulnerability right now with a modern, one of these routers in the company that, if I understand it correctly, it's just a hard-coded backdoor password and username they can get in. So make sure that your remote admin feature is off on that guy. And you go back to looking at your Surface and turn off everything you don't want to use. You're back to describing, I think I kind of paranoid with the 2 cups and the string thing, but go in there and turn off every feature you're not using. DLNA, any of these other discovery services with their attack vectors as well. Then transfer that to a device you have more confidence.
So Mark so good, he just covered this whole slide. So you definitely want to change the default passwords on all these things. As soon as you get them, don't use the default password. If you can configure a separate guest network, do that. So that way when people visit your house and they go, hey man, can I get on your internet? You can give them the guest network. That way they're not...
Different passwords.
Yeah, different passwords. That way they're not on the same network as your TV and your baby monitor and all your other things. You can't get into all that. And then this is what Mark was saying about disabling any services you don't need. This is the hardening part of this. WPS is an option that's built into a lot of Wi-Fi routers. It's terrible. It's basically, you push a button and it uses a PIN code so that you can connect to it. It's incredibly insecure. You should just disable that as a feature. It's called WPS. If your modem allows you to disable it, disable it. And then any unused services, like you said, especially stuff that opens up remote management. A lot of these things, you can turn it on where you can, from work, administer your Wi-Fi router. So turn that kind of stuff off. DLNA, UPnP, if you don't need it, just turn it off.
And if you understand MAC address filtering,
And just to make sure everybody understands, the equipment that you have, you're going to actually have to look at a web page, correct? That shows you all this information. And where would most people find that? Would they be looking at the name of the router and going there? Or are they looking at if the phone company gives it to them? Because I think that's where most people get tripped up on this.
the phone company gives that. Okay, so I think the question is, when you're given a router from the phone company, how do you get to it? What are you looking at? What are you looking for in the router? Typically speaking, if you get one from the phone company, it's going to have an IP address, and it's probably going to be something like 192.168.1.1 or 192.168.1.254. That's typical. They can set it to whatever they want, and your device magically connects. They'll figure out what network it's on. But I would start with those. If that doesn't work, I would try 192.168.0.1 and 192.168.0.254.
So you don't have to remember all that. Usually if you just pick it up and look at the bottom of it, it's going to say who the manufacturer is, the model number, the serial number. You can Google that. Just do a web search, and it'll usually give you the operating instructions and say the management port for this is 192.168, whatever.
There will also be a code underneath there of some sort that you would go into your browser, navigate to that, and then underneath it is probably the default password that's on there. And the first thing you do is you change it. And so for the services you're talking about, it could vary. It could be under a services tab, it could be under networking, advanced networking. Honestly, your best bet is to take your router number and just kind of Google the service. On this router, disable DLNA. Google that, and that'll probably give you instructions of where to go. These are all networking services, probably be under advanced settings for that. It's just going to vary based on what router you have.
And one thing that might be good for follow-up courses is have people bring in things like their Wi-Fi modem model number, and then we actually help you figure out how to set that up to do things like disable WLNA. Let's talk about security while traveling, Mark.
Okay, my favorite. Because I drink a lot of coffee. Okay, obviously you don't want to leave your device unattended, right? I mean, if you're going to go to the bathroom or go get cream for your coffee or whatnot, it's very easy to do a grab and run with your device, and then there's everything on there. But hopefully you've encrypted the hard drive and you're using strong passphrases with your laptop, so even though they have it, they can't do much with it. If not, then they pretty much have everything. You can usually look at somebody's phone and then within half an hour Google around and come pretty close to getting all the information you need about them and maybe even compromise them in some way. It doesn't take much to put things together. And everything's on your phone and your laptop, so you're also back to the issue of your risk assessment. It's a different risk assessment for I'm at the house versus I'm away from the house. I had a bad habit of losing my wallet this year. I've lost it twice this year. So I don't carry a wallet. For some reason, I never lose my phone because I guess we're in contact. So I literally carry just a phone, one credit card, and driver's license. I don't need things. Meanwhile, every time I lost it, I'm calling 20 companies, hoping I caught them all. So just be careful about what you're bringing out with you and not being unattended. And if you know you got to carry your laptop and your phone, do what you can to secure it. Just assume it's going to be lost. Treat public systems as untrustworthy. Treat them as hostile. You go to a coffee shop, you're logging in. First of all, you're assuming that you're logging into the access point you think you are. It's easy to spoof access points. Someone can have something set up that your machine hooks up to instead. Some of the iPhone had router names programmed in to give preference at one point in time. So, once the hackers figured that out, they just set up shop and used one of those names that was a preference and then connect right to that automatically. I don't think that's the case anymore. But assume it's going to be hostile. If you're in a hotel, a lot of times they'll tell you, okay, our Wi-Fi password is this. Clarify with them which router to use, right? Which SID to connect to. Regardless, if you can, and you're on any Wi-Fi, use a VPN if you have it. Does everybody know what a VPN is? It's basically a virtual private network. Like it creates a tunnel through the internet that's going to be encrypted, and all of your traffic goes through this VPN. And so no one, someone who's sitting next to you in the coffee shop listening to the signals, they don't really see anything. All your DNS queries go through that. All of your actual traffic goes through that. So it's like doubly encrypted, because if you're encrypting your session to your bank, which you never go to a bank in a coffee shop, if you're encrypting, it'll be doubly encrypted. And also assume, that these Wi-Fi's in coffee shops or whatever, that it's not, think of it more like a CB radio than, a Wi-Fi, because anyone can listen. Anyone who's sitting there with Wireshark can record every single thing you do off that router. That's free software that you can download. So never go to your bank or do anything like that in a coffee shop. Just assume it's hostile. Even if you're connected through, there's someone can do a man-in-the-middle attack if they really want to get at you. That's not that common, frankly, but it'll happen. If you're in a hotel and they have a computer set up for you, if you have to use it and be suspicious. Assume there's a keylogger on there. If you want to look for sites in the area, that's probably safe. If you want to go and check your credit card to make sure there's no errant charges, that's probably a terrible thing to do under those circumstances. Right? Don't trust it because you don't know what it's connected to or who's been on it before you. Right? If you don't have control over it, don't trust it. It's probably a good rule to live by. So, what else do we have? Travel only with the data you need. If you're going to Europe, again, you probably don't need to have your Fidelity or your Vanguard account app on your phone because it could be stolen. And just knowing that that's on there, and they have your financial institutions, they have your name, they have whatever else they can glean. There might be enough information to do some what do you call it, some social engineering and trick the bank into doing it to reach your password safety. So consider installing everything you don't need. But consider just getting a phone out there. Printers and faxes. I had a guy at the office who was looking for a new job, and he left his resumes and all his cover letters in the printer, so we all knew what he was up to. He did not appreciate it when we posted the information on the walls of the building, just to kind of troll him. A lot of modern printers have the ability that when it says something and you mark it confidential, you have to go to the printer and type in a code so that you can't forget it's there, leave it, or somebody can beat you to it. We had some very sensitive legal documents between one of our previous companies and Cisco that got printed out and left on a printer. That should not have been. Things there, somebody really made off with that stuff and probably pocketed some money. So invest in a printer that supports its functionality if you need it. And be very cognizant of you may accidentally print something twice that you didn't know you did. Don't leave anything in those printers.
Yeah, basically when you print something, go right to it, pick it up.
All right to it.
Don't, because it's so easy to forget this stuff. I mean, we see this at the office all the time. People apply for, a health savings account, which requires social security numbers, and they're going to fax it. So you see somebody's social security numbers left in the printer or fax machine. So, when you're traveling and you print your boarding passes at the hotel, go pick them up right away.
Don't use printers in threatening letters because all printers have fingerprints on there.
Let's talk a little bit about device security now, since everybody carries around just about all their data with them at all times now. Enable full disk encryption. We talked about encryption earlier, data at rest. This is something you do once, and you don't have to worry about it. So, like I said, you didn't leave your cell phone in a cab, leave it at work. It might get stolen, you might be out some money, but it's going to be a lot more difficult for somebody to get into that phone and steal your information. Second, enable your lock screen, set a password. Third, don't jailbreak it. This goes with the whole reputable sources thing. You're jailbreaking the phone because you want to install third-party apps that you can't find on the official sites. So once you start jailbreaking things, you're really violating the fact that you want to go to reputable sites. And also, a lot of that data isn't then, a lot of phones, when you jailbreak them, you can't then upgrade the operating system on the phone because it disables that functionality or it will disable the jailbreak. So jailbreak is basically when you install a third-party package on a phone so that, like for instance, this is really common with iPhones because they're configured so that all software that you download to them has to go through the official Apple Store. And so some people don't want to install software from the Apple Store. They want to just go to a web browser, download an app, install it on their phone, or any other third-party source. So what they'll do is there's software you can actually find on the internet called jailbreak software. You have to go through some steps to apply that to your phone, and what it does is it unlocks it. So that's one of the main things that security researchers will tell you leads you open to having vulnerabilities, because now you're installing things from non-reputable sources, and you're not able to update the operating system on your phone once they're jailbroken, so you're not keeping up to date. Containment, this is separate admin from user accounts. This is really more of a thing when you talk about laptops and setting up separate accounts, but also like if your kid has to use your phone, separate accounts for your kids, or even better, having their own devices. So if they're not using your device, things on it. Covering your laptop, camera, and microphone. You just put some duct tape over it, post-it notes. There are exploits out there where you can take control of a laptop camera. So it's best to just cover those when you don't actually need them for something like video messaging like Skype. And another one is use your own trusted peripherals and accessories. This is because these cables, your little USB cables, don't just carry power to charge your accessories, they also carry data. So you think about it, like if you need to mount your phone on your laptop in order to put files on and off of it, you use USB cable. So the main two things I would say there are use your own accessories. So if you have your own charging cables and things like that, bring them with you and use those. Don't rely on one you just see lying around at an airport. Secondly, you can get these things for a couple bucks online, and basically what it is it's a USB data blocker. This one's called PortaPower, and what it does is it basically disables the data channel on your USB connector, so all you get is power. So this is for those situations where like you're on an airplane, you're traveling, your phone's at 1%, you know, as soon as you get to the destination, you're gonna have to do like some cab hailing company, and you really need to have a fully charged phone, but you don't want to plug into the somewhat suspicious USB port on either at the airport or on the phone, or on the airplane. So if you get one of these things, it'll basically disable the data connection, and all you're getting at that point is power. You're not getting data over the line as well.
Just for the fun of it, why should you only use your own USB cables?
Why should you only use your own?
Yeah, cables. Why? What is it about a USB cable?
I don't think the cable itself is a problem. It's what you're plugging the cable into.
Aha.
You go to the airport and you got these nice little charging stations where you can go either USB or power. You don't know that there's a computer back there reading what's on those files.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
That blocks the data.
So it's not the cable. It's
No.
what the cable is attached to that you can see.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
That's your line.
All right. I want to add something to this, a previous slide that I meant to say. It's a pet peeve of mine, and it goes back to your assessment of risk. Control how far your Wi-Fi router broadcasts its signal. You know, the guy 3 houses down does not need to be receiving your signal, and nothing good can come of that. You know, so a lot of modern ones come with the ability to go to power. You might want to turn it down. Just
Or line your walls with lead.
Line your walls with lead, that's healthy too. So phishing, most common way that individuals get compromised. Avoid phishing scams. Today, you and I both got a phishing email. And for those of you who don't know, phishing is basically where you get an email that looks like it's legitimate from somebody you might know who probably had their account hacked and got their contact list stolen, and it looks like it's from a relative or something. So you kind of reflexively read it. And they now do things where they do pretty convincing things about sending you the links which have been compromised. So one of the tactics nowadays is they go attack the site, they compromise the site, and they send you a pretty benign-looking, convincing link just to the site, and then you get on that way. So be very aware of the emails that you're getting from people. If they're sending you attachments or links, and it doesn't look like something this person would say. For example, my dad got one from him, and it signed his first name. He never signs his first name in the email, so that's a big clue. Otherwise, it looks legit. It is probably the number one way people get compromised is through phishing, honestly. So be aware of that. One of the tricks people like to use is to hover over the link and see if it's safe or not. Where's it really taking me? Because they can make it look like a real link, but it really is going somewhere you didn't want it to go to. Don't do that, because there are exploits within there. I mean, like Apple will be nice and try to pop up a little dialogue, but that's all HTML running in JavaScript, and they can put an exploit in there. So that's not a good idea. I personally use caveman techniques of using only text for email. I don't let HTML go through email. It's a little old school, but I'm not going to be compromised that way.
That's just an email setting.
That's an email setting, right? So consider that if you don't want videos of cats in your email. It's not that important to you. It might be worth doing. If you get back to the idea of the trade-off between security and convenience, that might be a little inconvenient for some. But and do what you can to educate your friends and relatives. I've had my sister, somebody from Google called her, and she argued with me. But it was Google. No, it wasn't Google. They don't call you. So you may want to, that's another big one, is these phony tech support scams claiming to be from Microsoft and Google. Let people know that just because the caller ID says Microsoft, that's not necessarily them.
Yeah, caller ID means
nothing. It means nothing. We all get local calls from these exchanges from people, God knows where, trying to sell us condos and real estate, and vacation packages, fantastic vacation packages. So be diligent on this stuff. Avoid public away messages and reply all. Ain't nothing like advertisements in the world you're in France for 2 weeks or out of your way. So, offices typically have away messages. And if you're going to use one, they also have settings that only send that to people who work there as well, so it won't leave the building. So maybe you do want your coworkers to know, but not anyone who's phishing. Just randomly blasting addresses at your office. So if you're going to use an away message, set that option, or just don't use one at all. Reply all is terrible. Right, I guess from HR that they send it to everybody who accidentally hit reply all. Just be cognizant of not hit reply all if you don't really need to. Really need to. Update your browser. You can, because now a lot of newer updates will actually try to help you a little bit, whether or not a site is secure. It'll tell you, hey, that's not a secure login. Which is really helpful. Say a year ago when you just kind of had to know when you're browsing. Try to make sure that they're using HTTPS, which means a little lock is visible next to the address bar. Be wary of whatever plugins you install in your browser. Treat it untrusted. Be wary of your kids, who are probably more apt to click on install plugins that come with games and whatnot. It should be pretty obvious that don't click on a pop-up. Install something. One trick I use with my iPhone is I don't allow it to install. Go to the App Store off of the when I'm not on Wi-Fi. So using Verizon signal, I don't go to the App Store, because there's a cute little trick they were doing where they would send you, or you go to a web page, some ad would hijack the web page in some way and time it such that when you went to click somewhere on the page, it threw up the App Store right there, and you would actually install it. So that was for a while. So now I run strictly on the Verizon network, and when I'm doing these big things, I go to home to Wi-Fi. That way I don't have this anymore. It's happening 2 or 3 times a month. It's really annoying. Trying to stop and install when it was happening. So can, you may want to, if your system supports that, turn that off and only allow the App Store on your local network. What else is in there? Oh yeah, password storage. It's probably not good to trust your browser with your passwords. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. When you can enable prompts, so that it's not just so easy for someone remote to install something. The more you have to click, it's kind of annoying, but the more chance you have to say no. So enable whatever prompts you can. And here, yeah, it's a good idea to prefer, Chrome and Firefox. That's pretty much what they do, as opposed to using like an operating system vendor's browser.
Because they just update more often. I mean, Chrome and Firefox seem to have an update every 3 days or so, whereas I think Apple releases security updates about once a month, and same thing with Microsoft. So you're just getting more up-to-date browsers. And the phishing note really can't be understated. Like you hear about these huge hacks that happen, like at the Democratic National Convention. That was just a phishing attack. And so really the best thing you can do with phishing attacks is just don't click on any links, honestly. If you can avoid it, avoid it. If you get something you think is from your bank, don't click the link, go to your bank's actual website instead. Go to bb&t.com, or if FedEx says, I've got something to tell you about a delivery that I've got, go to fedex.com and type in your tracking number. Don't follow the tracking number in the email. It's a little bit less convenient, but this way you know it's actually from the source you got it from. And the same is true with attachments. If you get attachments in an email, it's really best just don't download them, don't click on them. And I know sometimes you get that zip file that says it's family photos. The best thing to do there is just call the person or text the person who you think sent you that and say, hey, I just got a zip file from you that says familyphotos.zip. Is this legit? Is this from you? What is this? So follow up with people. It's one more step. Takes a little bit of time, but at least you know it's actually coming from the person as opposed to just somebody who sent an email out that looks like it's from somebody. So let's talk a little bit now about data security and privacy. There's a nice little website you can check out called haveibeenpwned.com. You can put in your email address, and it will tell you if your information has been found in a recent data breach. So that's kind of a way to get started with things like going back and changing passwords on sites. If you go, where do I get started with this? I've got a million different online accounts. How do I know if any of these have been hacked? This is a site you can check because it actually checks to see if your data has been found online, and it will tell you probably what breach that was associated with. Secondly, don't store credit card info on sites. It's a little bit less convenient, but when you're paying your bills and you enter your credit card information, just use it for that transaction. It'll have a little checkbox that'll say, do you want to store this, and then we can use it for everything else. It's really better just not to store that information there, because then if they get compromised and they're not encrypting your credit card information, then that's not going to be information to get stolen. So enter it every time if you can. It's a little bit less convenient, but it'll keep that from being compromised. A lot of different big sites like Facebook and Google have privacy checkups that you can go through that'll take a look at things like, what information you're fine with sharing with advertisers, whether certain parts of your account are public or private. It'll give you information on what sort of stuff you're sharing, not sharing. So go to things like Facebook, go to Google, type in privacy checkup, see what they have, and follow the steps there. There's also a plugin called Privacy Badger, which is one that's created by the Electronic Frontiers Foundation that I recommend. And it's a browser plugin, you install it, and what it does is it just kind of has like a blacklist of different ad networks that different sites can send your data to, and it will block those by default. Another plugin that we kind of skipped over earlier, it's listed on the one sheet here. There's one called HTTPS Everywhere, which is also from the Electronic Frontiers Foundation. It's a browser plugin that basically makes, when you go to a site, it will automatically try to redirect it to the encrypted version of the site, to the HTTPS version, so that you're using an encrypted version of the site. Don't sign in when searching. This is, you have some web search technologies that also have other partner sites. If you're logged in to Google and then you do a bunch of Google searches, you might start noticing this uncanny thing that it seems like other sites are recognizing things that Google searches you've done and stuff like that. A lot of the time this is just because you're signed into Google and then searching with Google, so it's remembering your browsing history. And then when you hit partner sites like YouTube that's part of Google, it knows that you've seen these things in Google, so things will start popping up based on your Google history. You can also use anonymous search engines. There's one out there called DuckDuckGo, and their business model is that they do not track you and do not sell your information. So that's another alternative. Also, with using messaging, if you when you're doing messaging, it's good to use encrypted messaging so that your messages are actually unreadable in transit. There is a nice app out there called Signal, recommended by Electronic Frontiers Foundation. Another one that's very easy to install. You use it just like any other text message tool. You can send pictures, text, all the good stuff. So it's one you might consider instead of using other ones, just like the built-in text messaging tools. And then another one, big topic these days is protecting yourself from ransomware. This is when people come in and they encrypt your system, and you go in to look at your photos or log in and check email. Next thing you know, you can't get into your computer anymore because all your files have been encrypted, and they want some money to unencrypt the files. The best way to prevent that is actually a preventative measure, which is just creating backups. Because it's really best in this situation when you get hit with ransomware and files get encrypted to just wipe the system and then restore from your backups. So you want to have up-to-date backups. And you notice I say create secure encrypted backups. So that's just the encryption part is a lot of backup tools will have an option for encrypt this. This is just so your data is now not readable by people. And then the secure part is kind of where the data is stored. So that's kind of something you have to ask yourself. Do I want to store my backups on Dropbox for a long amount of time, where it's a public site that people could get access to? Do I want to store it on a backup drive that I have?
And store it on a disconnected drive, meaning, like, I know people who they'll map their Dropbox drive and just use it as a remote LAN. But if I was writing, ransomware, the first thing I would do is like encrypt that before I encrypted their local machine. So, wherever your backup is, make sure it's not constantly connected, because if you do get ransomware, that would be the first thing a smart hacker destroys.
Okay. So I have another thing that I think a lot of people would wonder. So when you're making an encrypted backup, would that generally entail kind of a one-step process of encrypting? Like you're selecting, I want to encrypt the hard drive, which is everything on it, or are you suggesting that you go through to sensitive things like, for whatever reason, I want to encrypt my photos. All my photos need to be encrypted and backed up. And then another kind of media has to be encrypted separately. See what I'm asking?
Yeah. So the question for people on the live stream is, when encrypting backups, do you want to encrypt things piecemeal, like I want to encrypt my photos, or do you just want to encrypt everything? I think you just want to encrypt everything. Really you want to try to back up as much as possible, at least all your data. So back up everything and encrypt it all. I think it's the easiest answer to that.
Oh yeah, especially if you're storing it remotely. Because Dropbox get hacked, right? OneDrive get hacked.
For those of us who don't have encrypted hard drives, can you encrypt a hard drive without being formatted?
You can. So a lot of modern OSs, when you upgrade to them, part of the upgrade process is actually encrypting the drive. There are third-party tools you can use as well. I think generally letting like Windows or Apple with Mac OS do the encryption for you is probably the best solution, because you're going to get the best performance on those drives.
I think you can also encrypt folders as well. So if you have, if you haven't done it and you can't do it because you don't want to format the drive, put your data into those folders, they're not going to really want to steal your operating system files. I mean, there's no value there. So you could, if you can't do it, you can alternatively encrypt individual folders and move your data into these folders.
And are there tools that you recommend for doing that, or is it just a simple across the platform step?
For the encryption part or for the backup?
Yeah, in terms of backing up, because encryption is one thing, but backing up is making a copy.
Yeah, there's a lot of different solutions for that. So, for instance, if you're on a Mac, they have a thing, Time Machine, which is their automated backup that'll connect to a drive that you have that's on your local network, and it'll push backups to that. You can also set up similar things. There was a nice service called Crash Plan that did something like that, where you could back up free to local storage that you had on your own network, and you would pay a certain small monthly fee to back up to a cloud-based service. But that's actually one that is moving away from a individual user model at this point.
Carbonite's another one.
Carbonite's another one.
Be careful in Windows because there's difficulty backing up an open file. It's kind of a Windows thing versus a Linux thing. So I know people who, they're running Carbonite all the time, and they did have an issue. It turns out, their core data files were not backed up because they're always open as a cache register system. So that would be one caveat that you have to be careful about with using a remote site.
And it's kind of a case-by-case basis too, like what you need to back up for what kind of support you have. Like if you need to back up Linux and Macs and Windows machines, you have a little bit less flexibility than if you just need to do like a Mac and use a service just for that, or Windows and use a service just for that. So that's a discussion we can definitely take offline. Any other questions before we proceed to social media on backups? All right.
You guys remember him? Any guesses on how old this is?
Do you know this?
2000.
Close. Yeah, I think it's about that. The earliest reference I could find was 2006, but that doesn't mean that's when it came out. What's fascinating is this thing is going to survive the cockroaches and in a nuclear annihilation. This poor guy. In fact, I was talking to a friend of mine about giving this talk, and he suggested that I use this graphic. He had no idea we already were. Okay, I got the perfect graphic for you, and then he was going to try to email it to me, but I gave him a fake email account. So, so things on the internet never go away. Even in all these little Snapchat apps that you think an image is going, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah,
it's existing somewhere.
Even if it has a disappearing messages function, so somebody just takes a screenshot, now they've got it.
So yeah, so be careful what you share, and that part of that is that it will stay there forever and embarrass you. Show up during job interviews, if you. So it will live on, and especially now that all these companies are working on facial recognition technology, and once that's done, eventually mapping that back to your name. Yeah, I wouldn't want anything out there like that. If you can't go read up on that guy, you have an interesting life after that. It's pretty sad because of that picture. Remove sensitive info. Yeah. A friend of mine, I'm gonna tell you a story. He and I worked with this guy, and I was sitting across from him at the office, and he gets a phone call from his mom. It was because his son, her grandson, was traveling. She didn't know that she was traveling to surprise her, right? He's in Colorado, coming to town to surprise her. But he had posted on Facebook what his plans were. Somebody had somehow figured out who the grandmother was and called her, who was actually able to mimic his voice close enough to convince her that he was in a Mexican jail and she needed to send $2,500 for bail, but don't tell Dad, kind of thing, right? And we finally figured out that it came from just random posts over time on Facebook, because he gets to the airport. Oh, I'm at the airport. He's starting to check in out all these places. And so whoever it was watching him, And it almost succeeded. Fortunately, he did call. She did call her father and said, "No, he's on a plane coming here. So he can't call you." And they figured out that they could make that phone call while he was on the plane, and she couldn't call him to get, verify that it was him. So even the most, innocent stuff over time can be put together by people, who are determined to do this kind of stuff. I mean, so if you put your maiden name out there, it's probably not that hard to find your birthday somewhere or a birthday celebration on Facebook. It's not that hard to piece together information to start doing, identity attacks, maybe calling banks and whatnot. So be really careful about what's out there. Because, there's another story, I think that another guy who does this presentation with Dave was talking about, a guy just took a picture of his desk, but didn't realize his checkbook was on the desk. And it was open. And if you zoomed in, you can see the account numbers, right? Just be careful about what you actually post. And in addition to what you post, be careful about the settings that you have, because, some phones will have the geo IP location. When you take a picture, an exact location to know exactly where you are at the time. They have that information. They might have date time information. If that gets posted somewhere, it could be exploited. But to be honest with you, most sites are smart enough to strip that before they post it. Just be aware that it's there, and it's probably a setting you want to turn off, or at least investigate. So I haven't looked at this in a while, but it may, hopefully, the phone companies do turn it off by default. The same thing. It's Amazon and Facebook, and just be really diligent about what you post out there, and just don't assume anything. Tagging photos and all that. You can read the slide. I think that's pretty common sense. The metadata. If you want to show yourself rolling around in Benjamins, don't, look at this new diamond ring I got, or this new $8,000 piece of whatever I got. Don't, try to avoid posting that.
I think it was the movie Home Alone.
Yeah. We always said before you share, it's online forever. Separate accounts. I think earlier I talked about, with kids, the further you can get them away from the account you use to bank with, the better. Whether that's a different account on the machine or a different machine altogether. So,
and also as a user too, you should create different accounts for the different things you do. So you might want to have your own personal account. You might want to have an account that's like just your work account that you have your work friends on. And then if you're involved in things like political activities, or you go to protests or something like that, you're part of some group. I'm in a heavy metal band. That's like a separate account for me. So then that way I can keep all my heavy metal influences away from all my work colleagues, so it won't scare them.
Yeah, also, if you can create an account on your system where you don't have the privileges to install software, that'll prevent access and having to work from that account most of the time.
So as far as takeaways and staying current, let's talk about a couple sites that you can check out online that will kind of keep you up to date on stuff going on these days. One of them is Krebs on Security. It's just a nice blog. It gives a lot of very technical information for people who want it, but he also makes it very down to earth, so it's very understandable by everybody. And he talks about things like Equifax attack, the data breach recently. So this is a good site to just go to every once in a while and check out what kind of stuff is going on. The National Organization Electronic Frontier Foundation has a nice thing called Surveillance Self-Defense Course, ssd.eff.org. That's on these sheets. And also they have some handouts on the back there that you can take. And this is just some other steps that you can take. For instance, if you're going to a protest and you want some extra security, or you're worried about having your devices searched at the border when you're traveling, they have specific courses on those sort of things. So it's not just kind of the general thing. And then the last one, I just found out about this one recently. The SANS Institute has something called the Ouch newsletter. And that's basically I think it's a monthly newsletter they do where they focus on some topic. So it might be like using passphrases instead of passwords. It might be on phishing and how to prevent it. and they'll just take one topic and they'll go really in depth, but it's very readable. It's not meant for security professionals. It's meant for anybody to be able to read. So check that one out. And like I said, the links for all those actually are, at the bottom of this page, and we have them online on the Electronic Frontiers Georgia site as well. Key takeaways.
All right. This is basically a recap slide. Email, be careful with it. That's probably your number one issue. Certainly number one corporate issue. I'm sure Hillary Clinton's number one issue is just avoid, phishing is easy. And it doesn't take much skill to do it, so be aware of that. Your home Wi-Fi, that's probably, you go back to opportunity. I just don't hear about many people getting, hacked via their home Wi-Fi. It's certainly an amazing place, a lot of opportunity there. That's not where you're getting the bulk of it. But, do everything you can with that. If somebody wants to get you, that's probably the easiest place to do it. Strong passwords, don't use web. Assume that there's backdoors to the device. There usually is. So put something in front of it if you can. When you travel, minimize your surface vector for real when you travel. If you're going somewhere, I highly recommend reading Rick Steve's book about wherever you're going out of this country. I mean, he really does a good job. Like I went to Amsterdam, and boy, he nailed the pickpockets there. He almost had them by name. I was amazed at how accurate he was with all the scams and whatnot that were going on. So educate yourself. Don't bring anything you don't need. Don't trust any systems out there that you don't have control over. Devices don't even unattended. Yeah, this is physical access. You definitely want lock screens and passwords, and if you can, encrypt the hard drive. Don't install superfluous stuff, and know the sources. And if you don't know the source, do a little research, or maybe wait a little bit and let someone else get hacked before you do it. And keep up to date. Yeah, update everything, whether it's your TV or your phone or anything that's running your refrigerator. I mean, if you watch Silicon Valley, you understand why you need to update your refrigerator. Browsing, password managers, you definitely want, password manager, don't let the web browser store anything. Basically, different passwords for different sites. All the stuff we talked about with passphrases and where you can use multi-factor, especially with financial stuff. Social media, just be real careful with that. Give some ridiculous examples that are true. I think no one in this room is probably going to have a problem with that, but we all have relatives and friends who will. So maybe share some of the information with them, because by extension, you would get, you could be vulnerable through them. What else?
Yeah, and one thing I forgot to say when we were talking about identity theft too, this is a real old school example, it's not a digital example, so I always forget to say it, but get a nice cross-cut paper shredder, and when you get your bills and bank statements in, shred them, unless it's something you need to hang on to, like tax statements, so that way you don't have documents out in the trash, because dumpster diving and getting people's personal information is, you can do that way too. Doesn't have to necessarily be online. So, what did you learn? Was there anything in these slides that were new to you, or is it all stuff you felt like you'd seen before? Or?
We have a number of questions and comments from online.
Okay.
I'm kind of saving those for the end.
All right.
Just personally, a bunch of good stuff on websites I haven't seen. I did not know about USB blockers. I've got to get one of those. First question, go back to password managers. How well do they work across devices?
So that depends on which one you use. So generally what you'll find is there will be somewhat of a trade-off for convenience there versus security as well. So for instance, the one that is specifically named and recommended by Electronic Frontiers Foundation that we also recommend is this KeyPass X. It is not, I think last time I checked, it is not, a web cloud-based service that syncs your stuff through the cloud. So it's a little bit more difficult if you want to do things like maintain passwords on devices and laptops and things like that. There are some services that will do that, but then of course you have the added problem that you're now syncing through the cloud and you hope the service is encrypted.
PC World recently did a review online, so you can go look online, about both the free and the for pay password managers out there. It was really good, so it talks about whether a password manager can do only browser-based stuff or whether it is also capable of storing application passwords as well. So I would point people to just Google PC World review of password managers.
Another question about passwords. What are the risks of linking one app to another, for instance, logging into a service through its Facebook API?
Right. So that's an interesting scenario as well. So one thing that they say is that better to use things like Facebook APIs because Facebook invests a lot more time and money into security and doing things the right way. Same thing with Google and their APIs. So they will recommend using those instead of just every Joe Bob site and using whatever authentication security mechanisms they happen to have. I personally have a little bit of a difference of opinion on that because I think in general it's better to kind of vertically slice, so if one thing gets compromised, you don't have everything getting compromised. If the question is because you're developing your own app and you want to have some authentication in it, it really would be better to use those APIs though, because better to let the pros do it, we're getting paid for this, and have bug bounties behind their security than you trying to do it yourself. So
you're ultimately weighing single point of failure
right
against the other sites. I mean, I've seen some sites that don't even encrypt your password, and I would hover over a text box in the web browser, and for some reason my password would actually show up before I had typed it in. Okay, for that site, if that was one of the sites I regularly use, you better believe I would suggest going through a Facebook and third-party thing. So just balance the sites versus the risk of single point of failure. Facebook, I'm sure they're pretty good, but hey, everyone can get hacked.
There was a comment about credit freezing, unfreezing. Yes, note that even if you have it frozen, you can unfreeze it for 3 months at a time. If you do have to apply for something, you can go do it, and then it'll automatically relock for you. Yeah,
you can set time limit to freeze. You really, really want to freeze your credits. A couple of things I read that I thought were good. One, freeze your credit, because Equifax thing is hot. Freeze it. TransUnion makes it very difficult for you to avoid their $19.95 a month plan. You really, decide whether you want that plan or the $3 freeze. Typically, the freeze is sufficient for most people. Good luck finding it on TransUnion's site. You have to really look. But freeze your credit, one thing for sure. If you already have it and you can change the PIN, do it. And if one scam they're worried about is taxes. File your taxes early, because if somebody gets the information, they can file ahead of you, they can refund. And then, if you wait until the last day to file it, you can find someone to file it ahead of you. That was probably the most interesting stuff I read about this.
Yeah, so the take-homes from the Equifax breach are pretty much do a freeze. You have to do that on all 3 sites. So you'll have to go to Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, and do an individual freeze. The cost of that varies by state. I think it's $3 per site in Georgia, and it's free if you're over 65. And then you should also do a fraud alert, I think, as well, which basically means that they will call you if they see certain activity on your account or if somebody needs information. So, and that only lasts 90 days, so you have to renew it. But you only have to put that on one of the accounts. So if you file a fraud alert for Experian, it'll go to Equifax and TransUnion. And then also you want to download your annual credit report every year and take a look at it and see what's on there. Make sure you don't see bank accounts, loans, credit cards, things that you're not aware of that you didn't open yourself.
Stay diligent about that, because a lot of the times when they steal this information, it's pretty common knowledge. If you're smart enough to do this hack, you're smart enough to know that people are all watching their accounts now. But you're not going to be watching it in 2 years. You're going to have moved on. They're smart enough to be patient and wait a lot of the time. So you're going to have to continually monitor this with annualcreditreport.com. Keep an eye on it. I wouldn't rush to get that information because not a lot's happened yet, frankly. You get it now and then what? You just don't re-get it, and then something happens in a month. So just be prepared to be on top of that in perpetuity.
The actual breach happened in May. It wasn't announced until September. So
and in addition, again, those are supposed to be free once a year. You get your credit report free, but they will try to charge you for it anyway.
Oh, they're going to try to run you through every maze to get you to charge.
And watch out, because the official one is, I believe, annualcreditreport.com. There's a lot of other ones too. I always recommend, if you remember the old radio show Clark Howard, if you do like Clark Howard Annual Credit Report, it'll go to its show notes. He links to the legit one. So, more questions?
There was a comment that the new Mac OS is going to make a lot of the old apps obsolete. That theoretically would cause some vulnerabilities. There was a question about spyware and spybot-like programs. How valuable are those to run on a regular basis? Running programs like spybot to check for spyware.
Yeah, I mean, one of the problems with a lot of these things, like AV or malware programs, is especially for AV stuff, the way that a lot of them work, they allow you to install, they use executable code to install new code patterns. So it actually kind of opens a security hole having some of these installed. So I'm kind of careful about like recommending necessarily everybody needs to install AV and run it all the time. I think that like Malwarebytes and some of those are good options for malware protection. Also, I believe Google has a service where if you don't have anything installed, you can actually like drag and drop files that you think might be malicious. Like if you do get an attachment, I would be and what it does is it inspects it against different malware patterns to see if it might be malware, and it'll tell you. The kind of thing about that is it's a research tool, so they probably keep a copy of that too. So if that's like your banking information PDF, you might not want to use that service. But it's good if you just want to scan something and you're not sure. You don't want to have an actual thing installed.
How useful is onto routers? How useful is setting a router to not broadcast SSID?
I'm not an expert here, but my reading on this is that it's actually counterproductive. I don't know the details, but it apparently causes your Wi-Fi cards to do something. So it seems on the surface good, but if you Google it, I think you're going to find it does the exact opposite of what you want it to do. That's a good question, but the conventional wisdom I've seen is not to do that. Most current wisdom.
Most current wisdom is broadcast the SSIDs. You might want to change it from the standard SSID. So if you turn on your Wi-Fi and it's using SSID channel 7 or 11, are the two most common ones. Put it on 2 or 3, so it's not on the most common ones. But that being said, the tools that there are lots of tools out there that'll find hidden Wi-Fi networks. And so if somebody's really looking for it, it's not going to matter if you're hiding it. You're going to see it in a list anyway. So if somebody is actually looking to attack a Wi-Fi network, hiding it's not going to do anything.
Yeah,
it's not going to do anything.
Do you suggest changing the IP address for each device?
For devices?
We're talking about the routers and so on.
I don't think it matters in a DHCP environment. I mean, sure, it won't hurt. The worst thing is it'll confuse you and the tech support people who are reading from a script, who know that this particular model is solving this address.
Yeah, I don't think changing the IPs is going to make a huge difference. Like more just really disable services, use the strongest level of encryption, WPA2 at the moment, and set a strong password.
We had a question if you could analyze the advantages and disadvantages to using Tor.
Okay. Do you want to take this one?
Tor's great if you know what you're doing. Okay? It's really easy to the government did a recent bust, I forgot what it was, drugs or porn or something, they did a bust, because they figured a way to get you to click on something and make it leak. By and large, yes, I recommend Tor. Just don't get complacent. Because if someone like the government's going to target you, Tor's not going to help.
Yeah, and here's the thing about using Tor, is Tor comes with a little usage README that gives you like 20 tips of using Tor. If you're going to use Tor, you should use those, learn them by heart, and follow all of them all the time. And it's also keeping the software up to date, so you're always using the newest version. And you don't want to download files in Tor. And you don't want to do things like Google yourself while you're in Tor. Go to your Facebook page and log in Tor. So So, you know, like there's rules of the road if you're going to use that. So it's not, I think a lot of people have heard the name and they think of it as a hammer. Like if I'm using Tor, I'm going to be secure. It's not that. It's like if there's a specific purpose you want for Tor for anonymizing, you know, using a particular site or something, then yes.
Just remember, Tor is government approved. All right.
And the last one was a comment that iPad actually auto-encrypted that password. And I didn't, I've not done my Wi-Fi hard access. Thank you. So, any other questions come through all of this? Appreciate it.
Awesome. Did anybody else have any questions like the cat or the dog?
Anything we didn't think of? Any tips?
Yeah.
I can go home and do.
So again, it sounds like it's a lot of stuff you have to learn, like it's really hard, and there are a lot of subtle nuances on stuff, but really it's just contain, harden, use encryption, use passphrases or password manager, and freeze your credit.
Probably the most pertinent thing right now.
Right. Cool. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for coming out.
And again,
Yeah. This is how it happens.